put your hand down, Rivera, or you're out of this school for good." The principal's voice echoed through the courtyard, icy and sharp. Parents gasped. Teachers froze. And Michael? He lifted his hand even higher, saluting the flag with every ounce of courage in his heart. The principal clenched her fists, turned to the microphone, and announced his suspension to the entire school. Whispers spread like wildfire. But the next morning, military trucks rolled up to the front gates. Engines rumbling, soldiers stepping out. And what happened next left the entire district scrambling. Welcome to XQ Incredible Stories. Let's uncover what really happened. The intercom crackled before first light had even touched the empty hallways, sending an unexpected tremor through the sleepy building. The principal's voice, measured and authoritative, announced a directive that no student was to salute the flag during the morning ceremony. Teachers exchanged puzzled glances in dimly lit classrooms as they fumbled to switch off alarm clocks and prepare for the day. The custodian paused mid-sweep, broom in hand, as if woken from a bad dream. Outside, the sky was just bleeding into pale gray when a small group of uniformed students began drifting toward the courtyard. They had practiced their routine countless mornings, lines straightening, eyes forward, hands lifting in crisp salute. Yet today, something felt unsettled. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear? No salutes. One boy, Michael Rivera, froze in the shadow of the flagpole. His heart hammered, memory of summers at his grandfather's side in the Veterans Parade rising in his mind. Parents arriving early for the ceremony noticed the tension. Furrowed brows behind coffee cups. Teachers huddled near the bulletin board. A few approached the office, only to see the principal standing behind her desk, arms folded, lips tight. When asked for clarification, she offered none, only reiterating that order must be followed. Michael slipped in a line, his hand pinned awkwardly to his side. His best friend, Annie, leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. Why would they do this? She pulled at her collar, eyes wide. He didn't have an answer. His throat felt tight, and he stared at the neatly folded fabric atop the pole, the anthem's opening bars still playing in his mind. By the time the bell rang, the assembly area was a study in fractured routine. Feet shuffled instead of fell to attention, eyes darted instead of fixed. Faculty members stood at the edges, uncertain whether to correct the students or join their confused faces. No one spoke as the principal took the microphone, her glare slicing through the cold morning air. Behind her, the flag hung limply, waiting for the movement it had known every other day. A hush settled over the gathering, each breath heavy with questions that had no answers. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of room 204, illuminating rows of empty desks and the gleaming brass nameplate on the teacher's desk. Michael Rivera stood at the back, shoulders squared, as classmates filed in around him. Today, for the first time since kindergarten, he refused to hide his conviction. When the bell rang, he stepped forward and raised his hand in a crisp, unwavering salute. Silence rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. His teacher, Mrs. Green, halted mid-note on the board, chalk poised above the surface. The students froze, some with mouths hanging open, others with furrowed brows. Outside, the schoolyard buzzed with normal chatter, unaware of the quiet rebellion unfolding behind closed doors. Michael's gaze remained locked on the classroom door, where the principal's office sat just down the hall. His lungs filled with nervous certainty as memories of his grandfather's proud smile flickered in his mind. Around him, the air felt taut, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mrs. Green cleared her throat, voice low and uncertain. "Michael, put your hand down." Her words broke the hush, but did little to break his resolve. Whispers stirred among the students. Is he in trouble? Why won't they let him? He looked to the chalkboard stars and stripes drawing, its colors faded but familiar. He thought of the anthem echoing in his ears, the weight of every promise it held. Slowly, deliberately, he let his hand fall to his side, but his heart refused to drop its salute. Mrs. Green's face betrayed hesitation. She lowered her voice even more. Michael, the principal's orders are clear. His classmates watched, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others meeting his eyes with a spark of admiration. A quiet knock sounded at the door, pulling everyone's attention. The door creaked open to reveal the vice principal, her expression unreadable. She stepped inside, clipboard in hand, and scanned the room. Michael felt every pair of eyes on him as she approached. No one moved. No one spoke. The usual rustle of papers and shifting chairs had vanished. The silence seemed to stretch beyond the walls, pressing on the children's senses. Michael stood firm, breathing steady, ready for whatever would come next. In that suspended moment, his silent salute spoke more loudly than any words the administration could muster. Students drifted through the corridor between classes, voices hushed like they were sharing secrets. Lockers clanged open and shut, but the usual laughter felt subdued, replaced by curious glances and cautious murmurs. Michael Rivera leaned against the cool metal of his locker, eyes scanning the shifting sea of faces. Every conversation seemed to pause as someone noticed him, then resume just out of earshot. A cluster of girls by the water fountain exchanged worried looks. "I heard they're taking him to the principal's office after lunch," one whispered, fingers entwined around her lanyard. Another shook her head. "They can't punish him for his beliefs." Michael wanted to step forward to explain that it wasn't beliefs but respect that guided him, yet the words lodged in his throat. Down the hall, a group of juniors circled near the trophy case, angled so they could watch without attracting attention. "You think this will blow over?" one asked, voice low. "What if parents get involved?" A boy shrugged. "Lawyers, lawsuits, this could get messy." As the bell's echo began to fade, a freshman approached Michael, voice barely more than a breath. "Hey, are you okay?" The boy's wide eyes reflected both fear and solidarity. Michael managed a small nod, grateful for the simple concern. The freshman gave him a tentative thumbs up before disappearing into the crowd. Posters and flyers along the walls, announcements for the science fair, the spring play, seemed strangely out of place, reminders of routine that now felt fragile. Even the janitor paused at a bulletin board, readjusting a poster about respect and responsibility without entirely masking his own uncertainty. At the far end of the hall, a teacher stood just outside the staff lounge, arms folded. She met Michael's eyes and offered a brief, sympathetic smile before turning back inside. That small gesture felt like a lifeline in the shifting currents of rumor and anxiety. A sudden wave of students spilled through the double doors as the bell rang, sweeping Michael along toward his next class. Conversations resumed in fractured snippets. They said military trucks will be here tomorrow. "My dad saw something on the news. Everyone's talking about it." Michael walked on, aware that each whisper trailed behind him like a shadow. In those voices, he heard both dread and defiance, the quiet beginning of something larger than himself. The principal sat behind her polished oak desk, fingers steepled as she summoned the courage to speak. The late afternoon light, filtering through blinds, cast striped shadows across her stern expression. When Michael Rivera entered, escorted by the vice principal, the hallway's murmurs felt miles away. Only the soft click of the door closing marked the shift into her office. She gestured to a chair opposite her. Michael sat, hands folded neatly in his lap, heart pounding beneath his crisp uniform shirt. The principal's gaze did not waver. "Michael, I've reviewed the footage," she began, voice controlled. "You know why you're here." He nodded, recalling the video from the morning's assembly that clearly showed him saluting. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "As of today, you're suspended for 1 week. During that time, you're not to step onto school grounds." The words landed like stones, heavy and final. Michael's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Behind him, the vice principal shifted uncomfortably, clipboard in hand, as if waiting to record Michael's response. The principal continued without hesitation. "This school maintains neutrality. Personal expressions of patriotism are disruptive to the learning environment." She leaned back, as though settling the matter. "You may collect your belongings from your locker before you leave." Michael swallowed, mind racing. He thought of his grandfather's stories of honor, of duty. He pictured the flag in the courtyard, its folds beckoning him. The principal's decree felt as cold as the winter wind he'd once endured, alone and unseen. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but unwavering. "I didn't mean to disrupt anything." She raised an eyebrow. "I only saluted," he said, meeting her gaze. "Is showing respect for my country a disruption?" Her expression flickered, but she remained silent. The vice principal cleared his throat, prisms of light momentarily dancing on the polished floor. Michael rose slowly, collecting the weight of her judgment and the emptiness it left behind. Before turning to leave, he offered one final look, a mixture of sadness and resolve, at the principal. Her reflection in the dark window pane stared back, unmoved. He stepped into the hallway, head held high, carrying the silent question through the empty corridors. When respect becomes revolt, who decides the line? Children gathered on the playground benches clustered in anxious knots, their voices a blend of excitement and fear. Swings creaked as smaller students bounced gently, ears straining for snippets of the day's news. Michael Rivera's absence hung in the air like the scent of chalk dust, a tangible void where his confident posture once stood. "Did you hear? They said the principal made him stay home for saluting," whispered Sophia, clutching her skateboard. Her friend Jay leaned forward. "1 week of suspension. And that's not all. Rumor is his dad's talking to a news station." A group of older boys huddled near the monkey bars, their conversation hushed but laden with speculation. "My sister said military trucks are coming tomorrow morning," one offered, eyes wide. The others exchanged looks. "They can't block the school," another scoffed. "That'd be illegal." Near the climbing wall, 2 teachers on recess duty shared subdued tones. "I worry about the message this sends," Ms. Patel murmured, swinging her lanyard in nervous loops. Her colleague, Mr. Lowe, nodded, watching a trio of kindergartners chase each other. "Kids need to see that standing up for what you believe in matters," he said softly. On the tetherball court, Mia adjusted her hijab and spoke to her brother, arms crossed. "They're upset because someone stood up for respect," she said. "Now everyone's stuck wondering what counts as respect." Her brother shrugged, spinning the ball. "Tomorrow could be even bigger. Parents are planning to protest." Lunchtime lines snaked under the shade of oak trees, and conversations shifted to Michael's fate. "I'd go out there and salute myself," a 10th grader declared, voice earnest. A girl next to him laughed. "And get yourself suspended?" The day's normal rhythm felt fractured. The whistle blew, and the children scattered for games, but the chatter persisted, echoing from the tetherball court to the slide. Even the youngest ones sensed the tension, lining up at the swings without prompting, as if routines now demanded conscious choice. Across the playground, a paper airplane glided past, folded from a handout about school rules. It drifted to the grass, landing near an American flag painted on the blacktop, a silent reminder that symbols could carry power far beyond their painted lines. As the sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened and the rumors lingered like fading embers, promising that the fight for a simple salute was only just beginning. Marisol Rivera's hands shook as she clutched her cell phone, pacing the narrow kitchen floor in her pajamas. The digital clock glowed 6:42 p.m., each minute stretching into a lifetime of worry. Her husband was deployed overseas, and she'd endured sleepless nights before, but this felt different, an urgent tremor in her chest she couldn't quell. When the principal's voicemail greeted her, Marisol hesitated before pressing play. "Mrs. Rivera, this is Principal Andrews. I'm calling regarding Michael's suspension." Marisol's breath caught as she ran a hand through her damp hair. She dialed back immediately, heart pounding against her ribs. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. "Principal Andrews." Her voice wavered, tears brimming. "Is Michael okay?" Silence answered. Then the principal's cool tone. "Mrs. Rivera, please understand that Michael's actions." "I understand," he saluted. Marisol interrupted, voice rising. "He's proud of his country. Why is that a punishable offense?" Principal Andrews exhaled. as though weighing each word. It's not about patriotism. It's about maintaining order. We can't have individual displays distracting the student body. Marisol's grip tightened on the phone. Distracting? My son didn't choose to be the center of attention. He just did what he's always taught, show respect. And yet, it caused a disruption, the principal replied. I'm afraid the decision stands. Tears slipped down Marisol's cheeks. 1 week away from school. How will he manage his grades? His friends? The principal paused. He has assignments online. Counselors will check in. Marisol closed her eyes, picturing Michael alone at home, pride bruised by punishment. Please, she pleaded, voice trembling. Isn't there another way? Couldn't we talk this through? Andrews's tone softened marginally. Mrs. Rivera, I'm open to a meeting. Tonight. Marisol's hope flared. The principal hesitated. I can make time tomorrow afternoon. Marisol pressed her lips together, swallowing the knot in her throat. Thank you. She exhaled, voice steadier. I'll be there. After hanging up, Marisol sank onto the kitchen chair, phone still warm against her ear. She wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and glanced at Michael's school ID on the counter. Across the room, the lone flag on a small stand caught the lamp's light, its fold serene, unassuming. She inhaled deeply, resolve settling in. Tomorrow, she would stand up for her son, and she would make sure his salute, simple, dignified, courageous, would not meet silence again. Michael lay on his bed, the room cloaked in the soft glow of a single bedside lamp. The schoolbooks sprawled at his feet, untouched since afternoon. Outside, the night wind rustled the maple leaves, their whispers seeping through the cracked window. He stared at the ceiling, mind racing with unanswered questions. He replayed the day in fragments. The principal's stern decree, Annie's worried eyes, the playground's hum of rumors. Why had respect become a disturbance? How could a simple salute ignite such chaos? He rolled onto his side, tracing the outline of his framed Boy Scout merit badge, its polished metal cold beneath his fingers. A floorboard creaked, and his mother appeared at the door, her face exhausted but determined. She perched on the edge of his bed, smoothing his blanket. How are you holding up? She asked softly. He shrugged, voice barely above a whisper. Confused. She nodded, brushing back a lock of hair that had escaped her ponytail. I called the school again, she said, glancing at the trading cards scattered on his dresser. Superheroes, baseball legends, remnants of simpler days. They'll meet tomorrow around 2. I'll be there with you. He sat up, knees pulled to his chest. What if they won't listen? His words trembled with fear of rejection. Marisol offered a weary smile. Then we'll make them. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. He unfolded it to reveal a photograph of soldiers saluting a fallen comrade's casket, rows of boots and rifles standing guard. This, she said, is respect. Michael's gaze lifted to her determined eyes. She continued, no one should tell you how to honor what matters to you. He swallowed, drawing courage from her unwavering belief. Do you think the principal understands that? Marisol sighed, standing to turn off the lamp. I don't know, but tomorrow we'll show her. Darkness settled. Michael closed his eyes, each breath steadying the storm within. The questions remained, but tonight he felt less alone in seeking their answers. In the hush of night, hope flickered, promising that dawn might bring more than just rules and decrees. It might bring understanding. The morning air was crisp as Michael walked to school, backpack slung over one shoulder and chin held high. He passed the flagpole courtyard without hesitation, memories of yesterday's frozen salute replaced by a steady determination. Each step echoed his commitment. He would not let fear dictate his actions. In homeroom, he greeted Annie with a nod. Her worried smile met his calm one in return, and she mouthed, "You okay?" He gave a subtle thumbs up. Teachers whispered behind closed doors, but Michael focused on the small acts of normalcy, stacking his notebooks, sharpening his pencil, arranging his desk just so. At the morning assembly, students filed in and took their places. The flag fluttered softly in the breeze. Michael stood at the edge of the line, posture straight. When the anthem began, his classmates faced the flag with conformity, hands at their sides. He lifted his arm into salute, precise, respectful, unwavering. A hush fell over the gathering. The principal stood at the podium, expression unreadable. Michael's heart thumped, but he held the salute through the final note. Then, as the music faded, he lowered his hand and stepped back, satisfied that he had honored both his beliefs and the rules. Later, in history class, the teacher paused the lesson on civic responsibility to address the hush that followed Michael's act. "This morning's salute caused quite a stir," she said, voice gentle. "It reminds us that symbols carry power, and that power can challenge us to think." She returned to the lesson, but the students remained thoughtful, eyes reflecting a newfound curiosity. During lunch, Michael sat beneath the oaks with a small circle of friends. They passed him a sandwich, avoiding the cafeteria line he could not enter. He smiled in gratitude. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I'm fine." As the clock wound down to the end of the school day, Michael gathered his books and stood by the entrance. He watched parents and students stream past, the tension of the week hanging in the air like a fog. Yet he felt a clear resolve within, a certainty that respect was never wrong, even if misunderstood. When the final bell rang, he walked through the main doors, head unbowed. The world outside awaited, its challenges unspoken. But Michael's silent determination would speak louder than any decree. Some acts of respect are worth standing up and standing out for. The sky was still gray when the first rumble shook the ground. Michael paused on the front steps, backpack in hand, craning his neck toward the street. Headlights carved through the dawn mist, revealing the silhouette of a military truck rolling into view. Behind it, another and another, 3 in total, lined up across the school's driveway like silent sentinels. Parents arriving for drop-off slammed their brakes, eyes widening in shock. One mother grabbed her child's hand, pulling him back toward the sidewalk. Cars backed up, horns blaring, as drivers tried to turn around. Michael's heart pounded in his ears. He watched uniformed soldiers step down from the cabs, rifles slung across their chests, faces set and solemn. The principal emerged from the building, coat collar turned up against the chill, and hurried toward the trucks. She paused at the lead vehicle, her small frame dwarfed by its massive tires. A soldier handed her a folded document, which she read quickly before signaling him to follow her gesture. Michael edged closer, unnoticed in the swirl of panic and curiosity. From a truck's flatbed, a troop of Marines stepped forward, helmed and booted, their formation precise. They unfurled a large American flag, its fabric trembling in the morning breeze. Beside it, the school's banner seemed small and limp. A deep voice echoed from the group. "We're here to ensure every student can exercise their right to salute without fear of punishment." Heads turned toward the principal, whose eyes flickered between the Marines and the school entrance. She swallowed, stepping back into the building. Students spilled out of the front doors, clustering near the fence. Whispers rose. "Why are they here? Is this real? Will he get in trouble now?" Michael stood rooted to the spot, every nerve alive. He had expected protests, perhaps news cameras, but not this display of power. A drumbeat sounded from the truck's rear speaker, an instrumental march. The Marines raised the flag to the top of a portable pole set in the courtyard, and for the first time this week, the flag caught full light. Faces softened in its glow. The soldiers stepped aside, clearing a path to the entrance. Michael inhaled deeply. The morning's ominous arrival had transformed into something different, a promise that respect would no longer be met with silence. The low growl of engines vibrated through the courtyard as the military trucks settled into place. Soldiers moved with military precision, unloading crates of gear and unspooling ropes that anchored temporary barriers around the front entrance. Their boots clicked in unison on the concrete, each step a measured assertion of purpose. Behind the barriers, parents and students pressed forward, smartphones raised. A uniformed officer stepped to a makeshift podium, lifted a hand, and called for order. His voice was calm, but carried authority that hushed the crowd. By order of the commanding officer, This perimeter is now secured. No unauthorized personnel may enter until further notice. The principal watched from the doorway, hands clasped. Her carefully maintained composure faltered as she met the officer's gaze. She offered a curt nod, stepping back to allow the soldiers full control of the entrance. Michael stood near the flagpole, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Behind him, the barriers formed a cage around the school's front gates, the military truck's massive wheels a formidable reminder of power. He felt the tension in the air shift, a mix of defiance and relief, as the soldiers asserted their presence. A sergeant approached the principal, document in hand. She scanned the pages before signing at the bottom. The sergeant saluted crisply and returned to his team. The crowd murmured, interpreting the action as permission granted for the statute of the school board's decree to be overridden. Across the courtyard, students arranged themselves into orderly lines. The officer raised his arm, signaling them forward. Michael stepped ahead, heart steady. He passed through the barriers under the watchful eyes of the soldiers, feeling a quiet victory in each stride. Inside the entrance, a temporary tent had been erected. Tables bore refreshments and folders labeled "Know Your Rights," manned by uniformed aides distributing literature to parents. Michael's mother approached, brochure in hand, eyes bright with newfound determination. Above it all, the American flag billowed proudly, raised by the Marines that morning. The wheels of authority had rolled in to protect a boy's right to salute, transforming the school's facade into a stage for civic action. Michael paused beneath the flag, hand resting lightly on his heart, as the truck's engines idled on. Symbols of respect, power, and the unexpected alliances forged when conviction refused to yield. A steel gate clanged shut behind Michael as he stepped forward, sealing him inside the newly secured courtyard. The locks clicked into place with an echo that resonated like a gavel strike. He glanced at the massive barrier, rows of barbed wire coils atop its frame, and swallowed. Outside, parents clustered against the fence, faces pressed to the bars. Their voices rose in a chorus of concern. "Let him out. He has a right to attend class." Some pounded the metal, rattling the structure, while others wept softly. Michael's mother stood among them, hand extended toward him through the narrow gaps. He held up a finger, a silent assurance that she need not break down the gate for him. Across the courtyard, the principal and a cluster of administrators peered from behind a tent. Their tension was visible in the crease of their brows. The principal stepped forward, clearing her throat. A sergeant beside her raised a hand to quiet the murmur. "Parents and students," the sergeant announced, voice amplified by a speaker clipped to his shoulder. "This gate is locked to ensure a safe and orderly environment during these proceedings. Anyone inside may leave at any time through the west entrance." A roar of frustration swelled. "That's not fair," someone shouted. Michael turned his head to locate the west entrance, but saw only more barriers and uniformed aides redirecting families away. He clenched his fists. The gate's presence felt like a cage, but also like a line drawn in the sand. He took a steadying breath, remembering the early mornings practicing his salute, the quiet conviction that had led him here. Nearby, a group of younger children huddled, eyes darting between the soldiers and their parents. One small voice whispered, "Will they let Daddy in?" An aide knelt beside them, offering a reassuring smile and a leaflet explaining the rules. Michael watched the interaction, feeling both the weight of authority and the tender urgency beneath it. He walked toward the gate, footsteps measured, and pressed his palm against the cool steel. Mouth close to the bars, he spoke softly, "I'm grateful you came for me. I won't let you down." On the other side, his mother's tears paused as she nodded, lips trembling in response. In that moment, the locked gate was less a barrier and more a testament to the lengths people would go to protect a boy who chose to stand, hand to heart, for what he believed. The courtyard hummed with restless energy as students and parents paced beneath the towering barriers. Faces reflected confusion, eyebrows knitted, mouths agape, while soldiers maintained their vigil with stoic calm. Michael stood near the flag, absorbing the swirl of uncertainty that clung to every corner. He noticed Annie's trembling fingers as she clutched his backpack strap. Her wide eyes searched his face. "Are you scared?" she whispered. Michael shook his head, voice steady. "I'm ready." She managed a small smile, drawing strength from his resolve. A teacher stepped forward, clutching a stack of papers. Her voice quavered as she addressed the crowd. "We're doing everything we can to restore normalcy. Please remain calm." But her words hung suspended, unable to bridge the gap between authority and anguish. Nearby, a freshman boy swallowed hard before standing on a bench. "Michael," he called, voice cracking. "Thank you for standing up. You're not alone." A ripple of applause followed, brief but heartfelt, echoing against the concrete walls. Students raised their chins, rekindled by solidarity. Across the courtyard, the principal conferred with the captain. Their conversation was hushed, heads bowed together in earnest discussion. Michael caught snippets. Legal, public opinion, safety. He wondered which would tip the balance. A mother in the crowd nervously adjusted her son's uniform. "Do you think he'll be fine?" she asked the aide beside her. The aide hesitated before nodding. "He's brave." The mother exhaled, as if that single word could soothe her fear. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, recalling his grandfather's voice. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. He opened his eyes and squared his shoulders, the flag's stripes rippling above him. With deliberate steps, he walked to the center of the courtyard. Silence fell as onlookers leaned in. He raised his hand in salute once more, crisp and unwavering. The gesture cut through the confusion like a beacon. He held the salute through the anthem's soft echo from a nearby speaker. When he lowered his arm, the courtyard remained still, then erupted in a swell of quiet cheers. It wasn't thunderous, but it carried more weight than any shouted protest. In that moment, confusion yielded to courage. The gathered throng understood that respect could unite them, even amid chaos. And Michael's quiet resolve had shown them the way. Tension crackled as the principles of protest swelled at the barriers. Parents paced, voices rising above the humidity of midday. Some shook fists at the soldiers, demanding answers. Others held placards high. "Let our children learn respect, not repression." Michael watched from beneath the flag's shadow, heart heavy with guilt and gratitude. A mother draped in a red, white, and blue scarf stepped to the front, voice hoarse. "My son needs to get a class," she cried. "He didn't ask for this." Nearby, a father bellowed, "You're punishing the wrong boy." The sergeant raised a hand, trying to restore calm, but the uproar only intensified. Across the courtyard, the principal appeared, flanked by school board members in crisp suits. They held a hastily convened press conference on a temporary stage, microphones angled toward the crowd. One board member cleared his throat. "We hear your concerns," he began, voice trembling under the weight of anger. "But we must uphold school policy." A chorus of boos cut him off. "Policy doesn't trump justice," another parent roared. Shouts of "We pay your salaries, and we won't back down," echoed against the brick walls. Children behind the barriers pressed forward to see, their eyes wide with confusion at the grown-ups' fury. Michael's mother climbed onto a concrete ledge, tears streaming. "This is my boy," she shouted, hand over her heart. All he did was salute. Her cry struck a chord. Nearby, a teacher stepped between parents and the barrier, voice firm. "We can protest, but please don't get hurt." Her calm plea barely registered over the storm of emotion. Journalists jostled for position, cameras trained on the chaos. Flashbulbs popped. A reporter's voice rang out. "Ma'am, your thoughts?" Parents spoke over one another, each story more urgent than the last. Missed classes, ruined GPAs, emotional trauma. Their collective frustration formed a shield around Michael, a vow that they wouldn't let him stand alone. Amid the uproar, Michael took a step forward, calling for attention. The crowd quieted enough for his voice to carry. "Thank you," he said, voice steady. "I won't let your efforts be in vain." His simple words cut through the tumult. In that pause, parents saw beyond their anger to the boy whose quiet courage had united them all. The uproar subsided into determined murmurs. They would not relent until respect was restored and justice served. An hour later, the commanding officer signaled his team to stand down as he stepped toward the main entrance. Soldiers snapped to attention, rifles held at rest position, eyes forward. Parents and students watched in expectant silence, the earlier uproar replaced by cautious anticipation. The officer wore a crisp uniform, medals glinting beneath the courtyard lights. He raised a hand to still the gathering and produced a clipboard stamped with an official seal. As ordered, he began, voice clear over a handheld speaker. I am conducting an inspection to ensure this facility meets standards for reinstating normal operations. The principal, flanked by a delegate from a school board and a legal advisor, led the way. They opened the heavy front doors, revealing empty halls lined with motivational posters, now shadowed by the weight of recent events. The officer's boots echoed as he entered, clipboard in hand. He paused at the trophy case, inspecting the awards for academic and athletic excellence. A parent stepped forward, whispering to her child, "See, they're looking at everything." The child nodded, eyes wide. In the gymnasium, the officer tested the PA system, pressing buttons and making notes. Teachers gathered at the edges, holding their breath as he assessed acoustics and safety exits. He checked fire extinguishers, emergency lights, even the condition of the bleachers, every detail recorded. Down the corridor, the nurse's office came under scrutiny. Cabinets swung open, revealing first aid kits and medical forms. The officer inspected expiry dates and organizational tags, marking deficiencies. Outside the classroom doors, students clustered, peering through windows as he verified that desks were arranged unobstructed, pathways clear. At the courtyard entrance, he examined the temporary barriers, verifying their installation aligned with safety protocols. He tapped the steel gate, checking its locks, and nodded slightly before moving on. Finally, he reached the flagpole area, where Michael stood beside his mother. The officer looked up at the raised flag, then down at the boy. He offered a brief nod of acknowledgement before returning his attention to the clipboard. Michael met his gaze, feeling the unspoken respect in that simple gesture. After minutes that felt like hours, the officer stepped back outside. He cleared his throat. This inspection is complete. The school meets required standards, contingent upon the removal of temporary barriers and restoration of open access. His words rippled through the courtyard. Parents exhaled, students cheered softly, and Michael felt a swell of relief. The first inspection had passed, and with it came the promise of normalcy returning to hallowed halls. Michael stood beneath the fluttering flag, its stars and stripes recalling images from his childhood that felt both distant and immediate. He closed his eyes as the morning breeze whispered through the courtyard, carrying him back to summers spent with his grandfather. He could smell the leather of Grandpa's scuffed combat boots and taste the sweet tang of lemonade on the porch swing. He remembered the slow, deliberate way his grandfather once explained the meaning of that same salute. "It's not just an arm moving," he'd said, voice gravelly but warm. "It's a promise, a vow to remember those who served before and those we serve alongside." Another memory surfaced, the Veterans Parade when Michael was 8. He'd perched on his grandfather's shoulders, cheering as men and women in uniform marched past. The drums had pounded like thunder, the colors had snapped in the wind, and Michael had lifted his hand instinctively, feeling a swell of pride and belonging. His grandfather had squeezed his legs, offering a proud nod as they passed. Then the worst memory arrived, the day Grandpa had passed the salute one final time as a salute to comrades lost. Michael had watched, tears welling, as the older man faded away, stiff and proud, unable to utter more than that final, reverent gesture. It had been Michael's turn to carry on that promise. Back in the present, he felt the weight of that legacy settle on his shoulder. The chaos of the past days, the suspension, the barriers, the military trucks, fell away, leaving only the simple act of respect. Every drill, every ceremony, every whispered hymn of "I pledge allegiance" had been training for this moment. He opened his eyes to see his classmates watching, some with tentative admiration, others with renewed curiosity. Even the soldiers who had guarded the gates seemed to stand a little taller, as if honoring not just a rule, but a lineage. Michael raised his hand again in salute. This time, there was no decree, no barrier, only the straight line of his arm and the flag's embrace. In that clear, silent tribute, flashbacks of service merged with the promise of the future, an unbroken chain of respect, remembrance, and resolve. The veteran stood just inside the courtyard barrier, uniform crisp beneath the midday sun. His silver hair and lined face spoke of decades in service, eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow. Colonel James Harkins had witnessed battles few could imagine, yet today's front was a school entrance and a boy's simple salute. He approached Michael slowly, hand resting on the young student's shoulder. Around them, the soldiers fell silent, the hum of armored engines receding into the background. Colonel Harkins cleared his throat. "Son," he began, voice low, "when I was your age, I didn't fully grasp the weight of that gesture." Michael looked up, curiosity shining in his eyes. Harkins hooked his thumbs into his belt, gazed distant. "I enlisted right after high school, full of fire and fury. I thought courage meant bullets and bravado. But over time, I learned respect was the real battlefield. Respect for your country, for your comrades, and for the sacrifices made so you could stand where you stand." He paused, recalling distant deserts and freezing trenches. "I remember carrying a fallen friend off the field, saluting him one final time before I walked away. That moment changed me. It taught me that a salute isn't just protocol, it's remembrance. It's an unspoken vow that we'll never forget." Michael absorbed every word, the veteran's presence lending weight to his own convictions. Around them, students gathered, sensing something sacred in the exchange. Harkins turned to the assembled crowd, voice growing stronger. "We brought our trucks here not to intimidate, but to protect that vow. This boy's salute reminded us of why we serve." He looked back at Michael. "Never let anyone tell you the respect is wrong or disruptive." A murmur of agreement swept through the courtyard, parents nodding as if discovering a truth long buried. The temporary barriers, once symbols of division, now felt unnecessary. Harkins signaled to the soldiers, who began to step aside. He extended his hand to Michael. "Carry on the promise," he said simply. Michael clasped it, feeling the veteran's strength and legacy flow into his palm. The crowd erupted into quiet applause. No banners, no chants. Only the sound of hearts moved by a veteran's perspective. That honor and respect formed the backbone of freedom itself. The veteran's boots clicked softly as he walked into the courtyard, uniform crisp, medals glinting beneath the midday sun. His presence commanded attention, not through force, but through the quiet weight of experience etched on his lined face. Colonel James Harkins paused before Michael, eyes meeting the boys with a gentle intensity. "I've seen the worst and the best of humanity," he began, voice steady yet warm. "When I joined, I thought strength meant never showing doubt. But out there, in the deserts, the mountains, I learned true strength is found in the respect we give one another." He gestured toward the flag above them, its colors vivid against the sky. "That salute you gave this morning, it wasn't just a gesture. It was a bridge between past and present." He took a slow breath, recalling long nights guarding comrades under starlit skies. "I remember a sergeant who saved my life in an ambush. I stood over him, saluted him, and promised I'd carry that debt forward. Every time I salute, I renew that promise." He glanced at the soldiers now lowering their weapons, their formation softening. That promise doesn't end with rank or retirement. It lives on whenever someone honors service and sacrifice. Around them, students and parents leaned in, absorbing each word. Harkins offered a small smile and placed a hand gently on Michael's shoulder. "You sparked something here. You reminded us that respect isn't disruptive, it's essential. It binds us together." He looked out at the faces lined with relief and newfound pride. No policy can override the heart of a community that stands for what's right. With that, he turned and approached the barrier, signaling the soldiers. They unclipped the locks and stepped aside, opening the path. Harkins returned to Michael, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Never apologize for respect," he said softly. "Let your salute be your voice." Michael nodded, understanding the legacy now entrusted to him. As the crowd moved forward, the courtyard felt transformed, from a battleground of rules to a place where honor and unity reclaimed their rightful place. Cameras and microphones flooded the courtyard as reporters jockeyed for position, their lenses capturing every detail of the now-opened gates. A cluster of news vans bore satellite dishes like mechanical flowers turning toward the sky. Journalists called out questions in rapid-fire staccato. "Young man, how do you feel?" "Principal Andrews, can you comment?" "Parents, what message does this send?" Michael stood near the entrance, his mother beside him, both blinking against the glare of spotlights. He felt the buzz of electricity in the air. Every whispered question, every flashbulb popping, insisted that his solitary salute had become headline news. A cameraman pressed forward, boom mic dipping close. "Michael, is this about patriotism or protest?" the reporter asked. Michael took a breath. "It's about respect," he said, voice steady despite the swirl of activity. Across the courtyard, the veteran, Colonel Harkins, offered sound bites for every network, his gravelly tone lending gravitas. "This boy reminded us of what we stand for," he told the national news crew. News tickers scrolled across live feeds. Student salutes sparked showdown, military steps in a safeguard right to respect, education versus patriotism. Parents clustered around microphones, sharing their outrage and relief. One father declared, "Today my son learns that standing up matters." A mother wiped tears as she told a local station, "We had to fight so our children understand the value of honoring those who serve." Their voices melded into a chorus of conviction that reverberated beyond the school's brick walls. Principal Andrews appeared at a small podium hastily set up beside the main doors. She cleared her throat, adjusting her blazer. "While our initial response was guided by policy, we recognized the importance of individual expression," she began. Reporters leaned in, pens flying across notepads. She paused, swallowing. "We will review our guidelines to ensure they honor both order and respect." As interviews continued, Michael slipped away from the glare to the flagpole. The fabric rippled overhead, casting dappled shadows across his face. Away from microphones, he allowed himself a small smile, gratitude warming him more than any spotlight could. By afternoon, the story had gone viral, trending on social media and dominating evening news. But here, beneath the flag's steady rise, Michael realized that beyond the frenzy, something more enduring had taken root, a shared understanding that respect, once suppressed, could still unite a community and a nation. The hallway stretched out in silence, rows of classrooms standing dark and deserted. Desks sat untouched, chairs pushed in neatly, as though frozen in anticipation. Michael walked past each door, memories of hurried morning bell races and bustling project presentations flickering behind his eyes. He passed room 112, where science fair posters once lined the walls. Now, a single sheet of paper taped to the door bore a notice. Classes relocated to gymnasium. A gust of air stirred the hallway, rattling the notice and scattering a stray worksheet across the linoleum. Michael stooped to pick it up, reading the student's name scrawled at the top in familiar handwriting. At the far end, he paused before the art room. The door stood ajar, revealing clean tables where paintbrushes once lay. Empty canvases leaned against the wall. He remembered stirring colors for the school mural, laughter echoing as classmates compared brush strokes. Now, the silence felt as hollow as a missing heartbeat. He turned a corner and noticed footprints in the dust beneath a window sill, smudged patterns of sneakers where students had once stood to chat. A faint echo of excited chatter seemed to linger, as though the walls themselves hesitated to let go of normalcy. Michael's footsteps led him to the administrative wing. The counselor's office door was locked, its nameplate glinting in the dim light. He recalled afternoons spent there, seeking advice on history projects and college applications. Today, the office waited empty, the counselor nowhere to be found. A distant murmur drifted into the hallway as he reached the gymnasium doorway. Through the open entrance, he saw his classmates gathered in makeshift classrooms under bright gym lights. Their desks were spaced apart beneath basketball hoops, learning persevering despite everything. Michael closed his eyes, inhaling the faint scent of chalk and polished wood. He pictured the ordinary routines, backpacks dropped with a thud, pencils tapping in rhythm, the chorus of voices responding to questions. The hall of empty desks had become a testament to upheaval, but also to resilience. He slipped the stray worksheet into his pocket, a small promise that he'd return these desks to their rightful purpose. As he walked back toward the gym, the echo of his footsteps felt less lonely. The empty halls were a canvas awaiting life's next brushstroke, and Michael's salute had already painted its first mark. Michael sat at a portable desk in the gymnasium, its metal legs creaking under his textbooks. Around him, classmates whispered and shuffled, but his focus was fixed on a small flag patch sewn above his heart. He closed his eyes, picturing the bright banner lifted at dawn, its stripes snapping in the breeze. Despite the upheaval, suspension orders, military barricades, media spotlights, his faith in the simple honor of a salute had never wavered. He traced the edge of the patch with a fingertip, recalling the day he first pinned it to his chest after earning in Scouts. That badge had symbolized promise, to help others, to lead with integrity, to respect country and community. A coach's whistle pierced his thoughts, signaling the end of history class. Students gathered their things, murmuring about delayed assignments and relocated exams. Michael rose, gathering his notebooks as he caught sight of Annie at the edge of the court. She offered him a warm smile, one that said she believed in him without hesitation. Outside the gym doors, the courtyard hummed with renewed energy. Parents handed out sandwiches and water bottles. Volunteers set up stations with donated school supplies, and a veteran Colonel Harkins conversed quietly with administrators, ensuring support for every student. The fortress of barriers had dissolved into a gathering of allies. Michael stepped into the sunlight, heart light with purpose. He walked toward the flagpole, where the flag flew without obstruction. As he approached, children paused their games and conversations, turning to watch. He lifted his arm in salute, an unbroken line from his shoulder to fingertip. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of every blurred morning, every silent question, every restless sleep. He held the salute until the lines of his classmates formed behind him, each one stepping forward to honor the moment. The courtyard filled with the soft rustle of fabric and the gentle clicking of boots and sneakers alike. In that shared salute, faith ceased to be his alone. It became a promise woven into the fabric of every gathered heart. As the salute ended and hands dropped to sides, Michael felt the steadfast truth settle within him. Unwavering faith can transform a single gesture into a movement, and a boy's simple conviction into a community's unbreakable bond. A helicopter's distant whir grew steadily louder, drawing eyes skyward as its silhouette cut through the afternoon sun. It banked low over the campus, rotor wash stirring students' hair and sending loose papers skittering across the courtyard. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was no ordinary flyover. Moments later, a SUV convoy rolled into view behind the military trucks, flashing blue lights announcing the arrival of higher authority. The superintendent stepped out, flanked by district lawyers and security detail. She moved with purposeful calm, her tailored suit and lanyard bearing the district seal marking her role. She climbed the steps to the courtyard's raised platform, nodding to Colonel Harkins and the principal before turning to address the assembly. A hush fell. The superintendent cleared her throat and unrolled a crisp document. By directive of the school district, she began, voice resonant, all suspensions or disciplinary actions related to students' patriotic expressions are hereby suspended pending a full policy review. A cheer rose up from the students, parents, and teachers. Michael felt the ground tremble beneath their jubilation. He watched as the superintendent's gaze swept over the gathered faces, lingering on his mother, then on him, before returning to her statement. She continued, "Effective immediately, the district will convene a committee of educators, veterans, students, and legal advisors to ensure our guidelines uphold both educational order and individual rights. No student shall be penalized for exercising their rights under the First Amendment." A murmur of approval swept the courtyard. Even the principal, once so unyielding, bowed her head in acknowledgement. The superintendent rolled up the document and tucked it under her arm. "Thank you to everyone who demonstrated civility and courage throughout this process," she said. "Let this be a moment of learning for us all." As the convoy prepared to depart, the helicopter ascended once more, receding into the clouds. The superintendent shook Michael's hand firmly before turning to speak quietly with his mother. Around them, the courtyard buzzed with relief and excitement. The barriers had not only come down, but the very rules that erected them were now in question. Michael looked up at the flag, its stripes catching the last light of day. Orders from above had changed the course of events, but it was the strength of a single boy's conviction that had summoned them. The future of policy, and perhaps even the meaning of respect, now rested in the hands of those who dared to stand. The courtyard fell into an expectant hush as the superintendent stepped aside, and all eyes turned toward Michael. Sunlight glittered on the flag above, framing the moment in gold. He took a deep breath, lifted his chin, and raised his hand in the most precise salute of his life. Every face reflected the gravity of that gesture. Students standing still, parents holding their breath, and teachers straightening in silent respect. Even the soldiers, once tense guardians of the gates, stood at attention, rifles resting but eyes unwavering. In that instant, the salute transcended policy or protest. It became something sacred. Michael's arm remained steady, fingers aligned, elbow at a perfect right angle. He felt the weight of history in the air. Ancestors who had marched in distant wars, veterans who had carried wounds unseen, and civilians who had stood watch on silent nights. His small act had summoned all their sacrifices, weaving them into a single, unbroken line of honor. A cool breeze stirred the flag, sending ripples through its fabric that mirrored the emotion in the crowd. Michael's heart pounded, but his resolve held firm, his eyes fixed on the stars and stripes that symbolized unity. The superintendent raised her own hand in salute, an unspoken acknowledgement that policies could change, but respect was eternal. As the final note of an unseen bugle seemed to echo through the courtyard, Michael lowered his arm. A powerful silence hung for a heartbeat, as though the world paused to honor what had transpired. Then, as one, the gathering exhaled. Applause and cheers rose in a triumphant roar, the sound of community renewed. Parents rushed forward, embracing their children. Teachers hugged one another, some wiping tears. Veterans in uniform exchanged knowing nods. Michael's mother pressed against him, proud tears shining in her eyes. He glanced upward again, as the flag fluttered high above, free and bright. The supreme salute had done more than affirm his right. It had reaffirmed the bond between individuals and ideals, between past and future. In that resonant salute, a school, a district, and perhaps a nation had rediscovered the power of honor. After the courthouse-style display of the supreme salute faded, the principal stood alone in her office, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds. Her polished desk now seemed cluttered with the morning's orders and memos, a testament to her authority and its recent unraveling. She exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair as she reviewed the superintendent's directive once more. Her thoughts drifted back to the early days of her career, when policies were clear-cut and obedience rewarded. She had prided herself on maintaining order, believing that strict adherence to rules fostered safety and equality. Yet now, those same rules had trapped a boy's act of respect in red tape. She pressed her fingertips against her temples, recalling the moment she first heard his steady voice. "It's about respect." A knock at the door broke her reverie. The veteran, Colonel Harkins, entered quietly, his metals dulled in the office's soft light. He offered a respectful nod before speaking. "Ma'am, may I?" He gestured to a chair. She waved him in. He sat, eyes compassionate. "I know you did what you thought was right," he began. "Policies guide us, but they aren't infallible." She looked down at the desk, voice hushed. "I wanted to be fair. I believe neutrality meant no individual displays. I never intended to silence pride or punish respect." Harkins leaned forward. "Respect isn't a display, it's a dialogue. That boy taught us all a lesson about flexibility and humanity." He paused, then added, "I'm here to help you rewrite those policies to ensure they protect both order and expression." She met his gaze, gratitude and regret mingling in her eyes. "I need guidance," she admitted. "I don't want to repeat this mistake." He placed a folder before her, its cover marked draft policy recommendations. Inside lay suggestions from educators, legal advisors, veterans, and student representatives. Each page bridged the gap between discipline and dignity. The principal opened the folder and began reading, absorbing each insight. As she worked through the evening, her posture straightened, resolve replacing uncertainty. By the time she reached the final page, she had a vision for a new code, one that honored both rules and the human spirit behind them. When she finally stood, the office felt changed, no longer a symbol of rigid authority, but a place where understanding could be crafted. She extended her hand to Colonel Harkins. "Thank you for helping me find the balance I lost." He shook her hand firmly. "Together, we'll ensure every salute remains sacred." In that quiet office, a principal found her reckoning, not in punishment, but in the promise of better leadership. A soft buzz of conversation rose as families and students gathered on the freshly mown lawn beyond the courtyard. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows faced a temporary stage draped with red, white, and blue bunting. Sunlight filtered through young oak leaves, casting dancing shadows over the assembled crowd. Colonel Harkins stepped to the podium, microphone in hand, and offered a warm smile. "Today, we come together not as adversaries, but as a community united by respect." He gestured toward Michael, standing at the edge of the stage with his mother by his side. Applause rippled through the audience. Parents linked arms with their children, neighbors greeted one another with nods of recognition, and teachers exchanged quiet waves. Even the principal took her place on the front row, her posture relaxed and open, no longer a figure of distant authority, but a member of this shared moment. A student choir began the anthem, voices clear and harmonious. Michael joined in, standing tall at the stage's edge, his gaze fixed on the waving flag overhead. Each note seemed to bind hearts together, weaving individual voices into a single expression of hope. After the anthem, families mingled beneath a canopy of tents offering refreshments, brochures on veterans' resources, and stations for writing thank you letters to service members. Children painted handprints on a large canvas emblazoned with the words, "We stand together," a mosaic of bright colors forming the shape of a flag. Conversations bloomed across age and background. A retiree shared stories of service with a fourth grader. A teacher described the new policy changes to anxious parents, and students compared their salute practices from earlier in the week. Through each interaction, the thread of unity grew stronger. At sunset, the crowd formed a circle around the flagpole. Lights were dimmed, and a single spotlight illuminated the flag's folds. Colonel Harkins invited Michael forward. With the entire lawn watching, Michael saluted one final time, steady, sincere, and shared by dozens as hands rose in unison. In that ringing salute, the school's lawn became more than green grass underfoot. It became common ground where differences melted away, leaving only the shared promise that respect and unity would guide them forward. The next morning dawned crisp and clear as students filed into the courtyard one last time for a ceremony unlike any before. Rows of freshly painted flagpoles gleamed in the rising sun, each bearing a newly donated flag contributed by families, veterans groups, and local businesses. Michael stood beside his mother, heart swelling as the principal stepped forward to address the assembly. Her voice was steady, tinged with emotion. "Today, we honor respect in its highest form," she began, eyes sweeping over the community she once governed with rigid rules. "These flags represent our shared commitment to uphold the values that unite us." As she stepped aside, a procession began. Veterans led the way, each carrying a folded flag. Behind them, students in scout uniforms, sports jerseys, and everyday clothes followed, each with a flag draped over their shoulders like a mantle of pride. Michael felt the weight of his own flag patch as he joined the march, sneakers crunching on gravel. At the center of the courtyard, a circle of poles awaited. One by one, participants planted their flags, climbing small ladders or stretching on tiptoe to secure the halyards. Each flag ascended smoothly, snapping into place with a crisp salute to the breeze. Families watched, some wiping tears, others sharing quiet smiles. When the final flag reached its peak, Colonel Harkins stepped to the microphone. "These flags fly not just for our country, but for every act of courage and conviction, especially those that begin with a single, respectful salute." He paused, nodding to Michael. Michael approached the largest pole at the center, the school's original flag. With deliberate hands, he attached the halyard and began hoisting. As the flag rose, students and veterans alike joined in a chorus of the anthem, their voices weaving together past sacrifices and future hopes. By the time the flag reached full mast, its red stripes glowed in the morning light. Surrounding poles held their banners aloft, a ring of respect encircling the courtyard. Michael lowered the rope, heart steady with fulfillment. In that moment, the courtyard transformed into a sanctuary of unity, flags raised in respect, standing as sentinels for the promises kept and the lessons learned. And as the crowd saluted together, Michael knew this gesture would endure far beyond any single day, an everlasting standard of honor for all who walked these grounds.